One Piece, the most political anime slash manga of all time, with its main themes being about dreams and freedom. More specifically, freedom and oppression, dreams and reality, and the balance they share for the characters involved. Unlike my other videos, I'm planning to use my freedom to get into my own opinions. I'm not gonna analyze the story of a character, but analyze an important part of a gigantic story, and that is Gear 5. The video is titled In Defense of Gear 5, so some of my points are gonna be out there. Some might say copium. I too have problems, or more specifically, unease about Gear 5 and what it means for One Piece. It could either be genius writing or go against most things the story has stood for thus far. Without further ado, let's start. First, let's talk about devil fruits. In One Piece, there are two main powers: Haki, which gets introduced way later in the series, and devil fruits, which we see from the start of the series. Haki could have its own video that I'm likely not gonna make, but devil fruits, for the most part, don't divide the fanbase as much as Haki does. Devil fruits are simple. They all have a name, and whatever that name is, the power is. And in exchange for eating one, you lose the ability to swim. For example, the Neko Neko no Mi, model leopard. As the name suggests, it can turn the user into a leopard. So, Rob Lucci, the eater of the fruit, can turn himself into a half-man, half-leopard person, or a full leopard. He can also stay in full human if he wants to. By turning into a leopard, he gets stronger physically and can do things that leopards do. This is only one fruit fitting into one category. There are Logias, people that can turn themselves into untouchable elements or other similar things, Zones, which can turn into animals, and Paramecia, which is basically everything else. As you can probably tell, Rob Lucci's fruit is Zone. He isn't important to this video, but he's been cool in the manga, so I wanted to use him as an example. And then we get to Gomu Gomu no Mi. As the name suggests, it turns the user into a rubber man, making them stretchy and, well, rubber. It's also the fruit of the protagonist of the story, Monkey D. Luffy. From the first chapter, we learn of his rubbery but not gummy ways. He can send his limbs 10 meters away, reflect bullets, and commit robbery from miles away. Later in the series, he remembers that he is in a shonen manga, so he gets two power-ups, Gear 2 and Gear 3. Gear 2 is him speeding up the blood flow of his body parts and getting a terribly wrong tan. This, somehow, makes him faster and stronger, but also drains his stamina quicker. It also reduces his lifespan, which is kind of uncool, but whatever. Gear 3 is him inflating his limbs like balloons by blowing them, which makes them bigger and way stronger. He inflates not only his muscles, but also bones, filling them with air. This gear also exhausts him greatly. Both are very cartoony, more so than other powers in One Piece. Later on, we also get Gear 4, which is a combination of his fruits and Haki, which has multiple variations and is even more cartoonish. All of these gears are meant to be the results of Luffy's creativity involving his devil fruits. They are nonsensical at best, but also One Piece is a shonen, and an old one at that, so logic isn't really a big deal for it anyway. Also, power-ups are always gonna be hype, so no one has any problems with any of these gears. Got all that? Well, I lied. About what? About what the fruit actually is. In truth, it was never the Gomu Gomu no Mi, but the Hito Hito no Mi, model Nika. So, a model of the human fruit. Not only is it not a paramecia, but what's a Nika? The true nature of his devil fruit is revealed in Wano, over 1,000 chapters into the story. Until then, it was just a rubber fruit, which is when we get to the first problem with Gear 5 and the Nika fruit. Nika is a One Piece folktale, basically a legend in One Piece. I'll talk more about it later. What the Nika fruit does is basically bend reality into a cartoon. It turns Luffy into Goofy. For example, his scars come off when he's scared and he has to reattach them. He can change his own size at will, basically a stronger gear tree. He can also lobby the government into extending time till public domain. In short, if he walks off a ledge, he has to look down before he falls. Just think of it as the mask. I have never watched the mask. The Nika fruit is imagination. What this implies is that gears 2 to 4 were never about Luffy being creative with his power, but him taking advantage of his fruit being the Nika fruit. Another problem with this is that now Luffy's fruit goes from being an average rubber fruit to a mythical, incredibly powerful zone. It makes it seem like Luffy didn't get strong because of his hard work, but because he had a cheat fruit. Now, let's try to defend all this. Luffy's fruit has always been far too cartoonish, even in the world of One Piece. Gears 2 to 3 were fine. You could look past them, but Gear 4 did not feel like it had anything to do with Luffy being a rubber man. It activates similarly to Gear 3, but with Haki included. It also has different forms, all doing different things. Things that you would never guess comes from Luffy having the rubber fruit. By that point in the series, the rubber fruit was basically a different fruit from what Luffy ate in chapter 1. So it being a different fruit in reality makes more sense. Now to defend the harder point. All devil fruits have awakenings. When a fruit user awakens their fruits, they can use their powers to their utmost limit. For zones, they just gain greater regeneration and vitality. For paramecia, they can infuse their elements into the space around them. And logias, who knows? These rules aren't exact, but they are a good baseline. In the case of the Nika fruit, Gear 5 is that awakening, and until it gets awakened, it stays mostly as just the rubber fruit. In a way, you could say that until the fruit is awakened, it stays as the rubber fruit. After all, even after Luffy unlocks Gear 5, outside of his transformation into Toon Man, he just uses his regular rubbery attacks, not really as unbelievable. But there is also the question of the limits of the Nika fruit. Back during Skypiea, the main antagonist was Enel, and he had the Goro no Mi, which was a Logia that turned the user into a lightning man. At that point in the series, he was unbeatable. The only reason why the crew survived him is because Enel couldn't hurt Luffy, because his rubbery nature was immune to Enel's lightning attacks. Which means that at that point, Luffy was definitely a rubber man. So, what does that mean? Can Luffy become immune to attacks if he believes that they can't hurt him? No, he's too stupid to know about lightning not hurting him, after just arriving. Did Oda just forget this happened when writing Nika into the story? Is Nika fruit also immune to lightning out of sheer chance? Most likely, the Nika fruits and the rubber fruits really are just one and the same. If you look at all the gears, they get more and more ridiculous as the numbers go up. Gear 2, sure, you could see it. Gear 3 makes no sense, but still easy to relate to the rubber fruits. Gear 4 is very far from what Luffy's original power is, and Gear 5 is just a Nika fruit. Which means that the only reason why Luffy has this overpowered fruit is because he worked for it. There is just one really tiny problem with that, and that is the whole destiny revolving around Nika, which is the next problem we're gonna tackle. This very sudden and very out of nowhere inclusion of Nika. In One Piece, the sun represents freedom, which is why the Sun Pirates were called the Sun Pirates, and Nika is the sun god worshipped by slaves. Not many know about him. In fact, he's first mentioned in chapter 1018 in the fight between Jinbei and Who's Who. A sun god worshipped by ancient slaves. Timeline-wise, he has to be from way before even the Void Century, possibly thousands of years ago. Not much is left of him, and only certain people know of the Nika legends, which is when we face a problem. It is only after Who's Who that we start to find out about all the people that know about Nika. From the world government, to the Buccaneers, to Vegapunk, to Teking, to even the Giants. And all of them only start acknowledging Nika's existence in, as of now, less than 100 chapters since his first appearance. As of writing the script, we are in the dreaded 3 weeks break, which leaves us at chapter 1111. 1111 minus 1018 equals 93 out of 1111 chapters. Everyone suddenly starts treating him like a big deal, even though we didn't know about him before at all. And to make it all worse, according to legends, Nika will one day free all slaves and end all oppression. The problem is that with Luffy having the Nika fruit, it makes it seem like he was always gonna become who he is today. Not because he is Luffy, but because he is Nika. It makes Luffy not just some really passionate pirate, but Pirate Jesus. Now, how do we start defending all this? First, let's talk about his sudden inclusion. As far as we know, the reason why so few people knew about Nika is that 1. He is very old. His legend was preserved poorly, and 2. The world government has erased most of what's left of him. Because of that, only really important characters are gonna know of him. The Buccaneers worship him as their god, which is contradictory, but we will get to that. Vegapunk knows about Nika from ancient texts, and likely Kuma, which is a Buccaneer. Teking is Teking, and the Giants live long lives, so for them, millennias aren't anywhere near as long. And none of them had a reason to talk about Nika, not until Luffy awakened his devil fruit. Especially not the world government, which is trying to keep it all undercover. Even being the ones that changed the Nika fruit's name to Gomu Gomu no Mi. Which leaves us with the whole destiny thing. That Luffy has basically become Nika, the other characters even choosing to call him Nika instead of Luffy. I have very little defense against this, and it's probably the thing I like least about Gear 5 and what it means for the series. One big defense though is that the Nika prophecy only talks about freeing slaves and nothing about the One Piece, which means that even if him taking down the world government is written in stone, him finding the One Piece is all gonna be his own work. There is more to say, but I would rather save that for later. So before I try to defend it anymore, I want to go over something else that people find problems with, and that is the way Gear 5 eats tension away from the series. Whenever Luffy uses Gear 5, he turns into an idolized, Nika-fied version of himself, incapable of keeping tension. He will do cartoony gags and make children's cartoon jokes non-stop, and if he isn't doing that, he's being surprised and having his eyes pop out. Even against the most serious opponents, he laughs, taking the role of Nika and spreading smiles and joy no matter the time or place. To a lot of people, this completely breaks any tension that his fights have. You could have the most vile villains on screen and he will laugh. Someone could die around him and he will laugh. Someone could be crossing a bridge in a state of anger and he will laugh. This isn't the only thing people dislike about the lack of tension Gear 5 brings. In an interview, Oda talks about how he wants to keep One Piece more playful. Ignore the camouflage tag! The fact that most modern battle shonens are getting more and more serious kind of bums him out. The way a character's legs turn into wheels when they run, or the way they get a light bulb on their head when they think of something. He loves that kind of stuff. Also, he's a Jerry guy. Now, what people don't like about this is that One Piece has always had serious moments. Luffy himself had serious moments before Gear 5. Honestly, this tension problem is the one I personally don't really agree with. I don't think Gear 5 ruins the tone of the series, so let's start defending it. One reason why I speculate people don't like Gear 5 is because of other shonens. In other shonen battle mangas, the more the protagonist powers up, the edgier they get. This is a common trope not only in manga, but in other forms of media. The protagonist getting stronger, while also losing a sense of themselves and those around. That's not Luffy. That could never be Luffy. It's not a sort of power-up that works for him, or even One Piece. So, of course, Luffy was always going to be the complete opposite. Instead of edgy and angry, he's childish and playful. In a way, it's a completely different sort of insanity. You could still have tension and dark moments, even with a cartoony protagonist, like Kuma, his entirety. You could say that we haven't seen any tense and dangerous moments ever since Gear 5, but I think that depends solely on the person. Not everyone is going to like a childish idol going up against demonic abominations, but that's fine. I feel like I had the worst defense for the thing I disagree with the least in regards to the problems with Gear 5. But oh well. Now that I have gone through this part, I can talk more in depth about the problems I didn't defend in the last section, because I think that is the most speculative part of this video. Gear 5 does something that a plot device in the story should never do: go against what the story stands for. As I have already said, dreams and freedom are the main themes of One Piece, and Luffy fully embodies that. For both those themes, we have two different main antagonists: dreams and reality with the Blackbeard pirates, and freedom and oppression with the world government. First, Gear 5, which is Nika, has a completely different goal from Luffy. Luffy has a laughable end goal, not something grand, something most likely childish. We don't know what exactly his dream is, but we know that everyone laughs at it while also supporting it. Whatever it is, it's not specifically freeing every slave. Sure, it might include it in a roundabout way or align with it, but it's not gonna be just that. Nika is meant to free all the slaves. Luffy is not a hero that would share his meat with others. There is a disconnect between the two. Something I also haven't talked about is the fact that zone awakenings can ruin the devil fruit user's mind. Let's compare the impel down lunatics with Lucci. Lucci has full control of himself, able to do whatever he wants, even with his awakenings. He has no difficulties. The impel down circus animals used to be devil fruit users, but now are only husks of their former selves, trapped by their own fruits, living only by instinct. Luffy is somewhere in between. He isn't fully oppressed by his devil fruit, but he can't control it as freely as Lucci. He has no choice but to laugh at everything that happens to him and everything that happens around him, which is what Nika is meant to do: be joyful. But joy isn't always needed nor wanted, which is shown beautifully by the smile fruits made by Fartman. They have a 10% chance of giving the eater artificial zone powers, while also having a 90% chance of taking away all their exterior emotions, leaving them with only joy and happiness. Those 90% are unable to express sadness, fear, or any other emotion other than smiling/laughing. Even if their family and friends are dying, they have no choice but to laugh, even through great grief. So while Nika spreading smiles and laughter sounds great, sometimes it's detrimental. In Gear 5, Luffy is also stuck being happy, like he ate a smile fruit. As I said, it's a form of insanity, just not an edgy one. It's why I speculate that at some point in the story, Luffy is going to have to outgrow Gear 5, because it takes away not only his freedom, but also shapes his dreams to fit the Nika prophecy. Now, I want to go a little bit more in depth into Nika and why the problems with him are easily fixable. Nika, a god of the sun and freedom, friend of the slaves and hope to all, worshipped as a god of smiles, which is rather counterintuitive. To worship and pray to a god like Nika is a bit weird. Nika is a symbol of freedom, the end of oppression. He's meant to be on the same level as everyone else, not an idol to be worshipped like an actual god. Another thing is his existence. We can't know for sure whether or not Nika has really existed or is just a made-up dream by ancient slaves. Or maybe an amalgamation of different saviors, who knows. Either way, no way to know if there ever was a sun god named Nika. His devil fruit exists, but we don't know why devil fruits are a thing either. We only really have Vegapunk's theory that devil fruits are made of hopes and dreams of the people. So we have no clue. I mean, if Nika was a thing and his devil fruit was the proof, then does that mean that Buddha exists too? And finally, we get to the things Nika has done before having his fruit be swallowed by Luffy. Which is pretty much nothing if you don't count Joy Boy. The Buccaneers are almost extinct. There have been slaves everywhere for centuries. Fishmen are stuck at the bottom of the ocean, and Joy Boy, another Nika, failed. Even if it's here now, you can't untragedy Kuma. You can't bring back Fisher Tiger. You can't revive all those who have died believing in Nika. Unless every fight against oppression is attributed to Nika in some way. Which could be the case. Either way, we all know what Luffy thinks of gods that can't save their people. The reason why I went through all this is because I truly think that Gear 5 is something Luffy is going to have to overcome. There are too many inconsistencies with it. Too much of it that doesn't work. Do I think that Nika is evil? No. But I do think it's something that Luffy will somehow have to outgrow, one way or another. It feels like the characters in One Piece are the ones misunderstanding Nika. The ones who believe in Nika believe that he will save them from their suffering. But in One Piece, no one gets free without some form of resistance from themselves. Nika isn't meant to be a savior that shows up like Jesus and makes everything work, but someone to be idolized, not as a god but as a goal. People are meant to be their own Nika. Nika is just a symbol with a devil fruit based on him. Nika can't save everyone. People need to become their own Nika and save themselves. Nika didn't save Kuma or Bonnie. Kuma fought for Kuma. Kuma saved Bonnie. Luffy has done a lot of good for the world of One Piece, but he hasn't done everything. Nor did he do the things he did by himself. Even so, the people who see Luffy as Nika still see the Luffy in him. The Giants didn't save Luffy because he's Nika, but because he's a Luffy. Luffy was always meant to be more than Nika. Nika isn't a god, but a symbol of the sun and freedom. Now, I think I have talked about Nika enough, so I want to go over a few other things in regards to Gear 5 in the next segment. Now let's talk about the part of the fandom that is universally hated and engaged with. The power scaling. There is nothing to really talk about. Power scaling has never and will never work in One Piece. It's one of those rule of cool types of manga. It never really makes sense. This isn't something unique to One Piece. Every shonen has terrible power scaling, because in every anime, everyone will slash bullets midair, dodge beams of light, and survive because tenacity, I guess. Gear 5 is very overpowered and seems rather unbeatable at times, which is another thing that kills tension for a lot of people. But depending on how Oda feels, Gear 5 stocks could plummet at his command. The best way to engage with power scaling is just to have fun with it, not taking it too seriously. Or maybe do, agenda piece is glorious. And power scaling leads us to a different problem as well, the weakness of the Straw Hats. Recently it feels like Luffy is simply way stronger than the other crew members, making the likes of Zoro and Sanji obsolete. To defend this, for one, I think that the power distance between them is a little exaggerated. Not too much though. Ever since Wano, as I'm writing the script, the only clean fight that Zoro or Sanji, the ones that need to be powerful, have had is Zoro versus Lucci. And I can't think of anything else. Maybe I'm dumb. The other Straw Hats simply haven't had the chance to really prove themselves. Another point is that in One Piece, everyone is constantly getting stronger, so with time the other Straw Hats could become better fighters as well. Ultimately though, this isn't a problem I really attribute to Gear 5. This is a problem with current One Piece. There are simply too many characters, too many moving parts at all times. Characters that are important. Just look at Egghead and how many players are in it. And until the end of One Piece, this will continue. We are in the final saga with everything coming together. It's hard to make room for every specific Straw Hat. It's a problem, but one I don't think can be fixed. Before I end this segment, there is another power scaling thing that I find rather funny. And that's Luffy versus Katakuri. The whole gimmick of that fight is that Katakuri's Mochi Mochi fruit is just Luffy's Gomu Gomu fruit, but better in every way, and the only reason why Luffy won is because he had something to fight for, and Katakuri, not really. But now, looking back on it, I find it funny how the whole gimmick of that fight turned out wrong the next arc. But I guess you could defend that by saying that at that point, Luffy really did only have the rubber fruit. He hadn't awakened his fruit yet, only at the edge of it. Still, screw Katakuri, I guess. At the end of the day, all we can do is wait and hope for Oda to cook well. One Piece is his child, and if he thinks that this story is going in the correct decision, we can only have faith in him. Like, subscribe, whatever you do, I'm homeless, I need the attention. I think I have gone through anything. If you have any problems with Gear 5, tell me in the comments, I will try to come up with a defense for it. If you have a problem with my video, you can